How are you?
Saw your video after your half a workout.
You saw my video after my half a workout.
That's what you said. You said you got half of it in.
I'm a firm believer in, just getting in whatever you can. Get it where you can. It's the cumulative effect.
Yep. And make it a habit.
Exactly. So, yeah.
So how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm exhaling. It's 11 o'clock. I've been in 4 meetings already.
I understand.
You see, I had my headset on. I was, you're trying to say, hey, I gotta go. You don't want to really push the button, but you really have your hand hovering over the button.
So I've got some questions this morning. I'm going to have a conversation later today that I've prepped a lot for with a friend around just growing awareness of our white blindness and white privilege and how things should be approached. And there's so many issues out there that are hot buttons right now, right?
Okay.
And I know your perspective is just your perspective. You're not representing every Black person in America. And I am curious, with the whole debate around the statues and tearing statues down, and what are your thoughts on that? I haven't heard a whole lot about it because I've been avoiding the news like crazy, but it has become a hot button in at least one circle I'm in the last couple weeks.
Okay, so here's my comment on the statues, right? The statues are perpetuation of something that either you're proud of or you're not proud of. The only reason why you get a monument erected of you is because you've done something monumental. You get what I'm saying? Because you've done something monumental. Now, when you put that statue up there, what you're saying, you've done something monumental to what?
Right.
Because that's why it's called a what? Monument.
Right.
Because of something that is monumental. So monumental of what? Robert E. Lee is monumental of what?
Okay, now stop. That one I can absolutely, I get 100%. But okay. I'm talking, so let's get specific, right? Because to me, there is no excuse to have a monument to him. That's my perspective.
Okay.
And we've our forefathers, Lincoln, monumental to what? Washington, monumental to what? As I've come to realize so much in the last several weeks that so much of our history, I don't know. And I think most of the country is probably in the same seat. Do we celebrate the positives by leaving those statues while also acknowledging, oh yeah, there was some pretty crappy stuff going on too.
Right. So here's the conversation. When you talk, you said, this is monumental to what? And then you take a look at you can just pick up just about anybody, and they're going to have something where somebody's not going to have a positive check mark in that column. Would you agree?
Well, how about every human?
Right, exactly. So the question becomes, in your columns in your check marks, do you have more check marks on the positive or more check marks on the negative to that monumental reasoning behind whatever the monument is?
Right.
And it's some things you can have numerous checks on the positive check mark. However, if you could have 100 check marks on the positive side, but if you murdered 2 people in cold blood, do you still get a monument?
Right.
There's got to be a balance somewhere. There's a balance somewhere. But the question is,
it's such an interesting conversation, and it came front and center to my mind again last week because everybody who knows me knows I love Broadway musicals, and I watched Hamilton again.
Right.
And such a well-written historic show. And guess what they don't really talk about?
Yeah.
Slavery. And it's an entire it's a cast of all color, which I love.
Right.
Obviously, it's what Lin-Manuel wanted to do, but it's in celebration and teaching about these forefathers.
Now, when you had that conversation about the forefathers, I'm just going to be I'm going to give a little deference here because um when you I'm not going to say you don't know better, but you know better. There's a little there's a shade of gray area, but you cannot ignore that that's what they did. Does that make sense? You
Well,
can't just say, "Oh, they did all of these great things," but we're gonna ignore these other things. They did all of these great things, and these are some of the other things that fall into this history block that we don't know.
yeah. Well,
However,
and
it's a
again, I
part of
think
it.
this is a time where that's getting exposed because we didn't know. It was purposefully kept out of my education.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. So, does that answer your question?
it does, and I think there'd be again, if we had 100 people, it'd be 100 different uh, opinions on what should
Right.
happen.
Mhm.
I think it's the most important thing we can do is listen and truly understand, and then bring those pieces of history that have been whitewashed or completely ignored
Right.
forward.
Well, when you're having that conversation about monuments, remember the root of the root word of monument or the root of monument is that they've done something monumental,
Right. Yeah. And what you
worthy of
said,
a monument.
yeah. And as you said, it just perpetuates, right? It's a constant reminder. Yeah. Um, okay. So something else that came up in a couple conversations, white people who say, I am not racist, I'm not white privileged, I have a black friend, or I have a bunch of black friends. When you hear that, because I'm sure I've said it, what do you think? How does that hit your ears?
Well, I mean that's a statement of ignorance. It just is. It's a statement of ignorance, and the reason why I say it's a statement of ignorance. And ignorance is just lack of knowledge. Yeah, we all have racist moments. Let me make that clear. Even the person that says I'm colorblind, even Gary said I don't see color. Well, I'm pretty sure that there's something in your life that causes you to have some kind of a reaction because anybody that's been socialized in America has issues, right?
Yep.
And we are human and we're predisposed to absorb the things around us. And whether it's on a conscious level or a subconscious level, we have our own set of challenges. We just sometimes we don't even recognize that we do it. Like I can go around a group of white people and they can do some things that they don't even know what they're doing. They just do it. I'll give you case in point. I've been around numerous well-intended folks, right? And they will come up to me and say, that was so articulate.
Yeah.
What the flippy flap that right there in itself, right? They don't know.
No, they
They
think
think
they're
they're
being
being
nice, not ignorant, right?
yeah, it's ignorance. They don't even know that they don't even know what they're saying.
I was
So,
listening this morning to Michelle Obama's book, which I'm listening to now every morning, and it's so cool. I'm walking with Michelle Obama,
right.
um, and she said, as a kid, one of her cousins, they were sitting out on the porch, and one of her cousins said, "Why do you talk so white?"
Mm-hmm.
So it can go both ways, right? I mean,
Oh, well, yes, it can go both ways. We have tendencies. We have racially biased tendencies no matter where.
yeah,
Now, notice I didn't say we're racist. I said we have racially biased tendencies because there's a difference.
absolutely.
Um, there's a difference. We have racially biased tendencies on all ends of the
Well, and I
spectrum.
think we all do. Um, I
Socialization in America,
remember that, and by the way, we're in our office meeting, not
uh-huh,
just on the come-togethers, but in the office
right?
meetings, we are striving to incorporate more panels on diversity, and we had one last week with 4 of our Black agents, and I was so happy. A few of them are here, 2 of them at least. Um, And after that meeting, I had other agents of ours reach out and say, hey, can we do one on Muslims and the Muslim experience? And I went, oh my gosh, there's so many conversations that we
Right.
haven't had that I think we need to have.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me years ago, one of our age, I mean, this is like 2004 or five. I was driving through town with one of our current agents,
Right.
and we were on the freeway, and there was a driver around us, and he goes, oh, DWA. I went, what? What is that? I'd never heard that term before. And he didn't mean anything racially negative about it.
Right.
But the style of driving to him indicated that the driver was Asian and DWA was driving while Asian.
Right.
And I thought, I don't know why I thought about that last week. And I thought, how many, we all have racial biases, like you just said, that we just stick an entire community with.
Correct. Correct. And so it becomes it's really interesting because when people say to me, I don't have a racist bone in my body, and that's why I flipped it to say racially biased.
Yeah.
Because it's not you as a whole are racist. You just have tendencies to do things that have a racial bias that could be insulting to someone else.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think racist is a term that's overused.
Well, I think in my reading, the term itself, the connotation, the actual meaning has changed over the years, right? Our system is racist. If you're existing in this system, then you're participating in it. And that's why I want to continue doing these calls, because we've got to shine a light on it.
Right. Yeah. And it's really delicate. And like I've heard some folks, I've heard some white folks say, well, what can't we say? What's not offensive to somebody? That's ignorance. At some point it should click in, probably. Well, not, I should say it's ignorance because you don't know. And sometimes it doesn't click in because you just haven't had enough exposure to people of other races to understand what's a sensitive spot for them and what's not a sensitive spot for them. And a lot of times when you're in the majority, I'm going to go back to your conversation about white privilege. White privilege doesn't even allow you to recognize it because your normal is not the normal for other people.
Right.
And
unless we're intentional, we're not going to just luck into it, right? I mean,
exactly.
We're going to have to intentionally seek out people with different experience, become curious. I think that's probably the one thing we can all be more of, is just more curious.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Shelve the judgment and ask some questions and listen.
And that's where we had the real big issue. We had the big issue with just stop and listening. We have a huge issue with that. We always have to interject what our feelings or what our thoughts are.
But if those are misinformed feelings or thoughts, how are you going to learn?
Right. You can't. You can't listen and learn because in the absence of a conversation, ignorance prevails.
You getting t-shirts with that made? Come on.
I really should. I really should.
Or maybe masks.
You know what? I have my t-shirt guy. I'm gonna go next door and I'm gonna have him do that. I'm gonna have him say, hey man, design me a shirt. Say, in the absence of conversation, ignorance prevails.
It's brilliant. And it's a statement for this year anyway.
It's a statement for any year. You can wear that you could wear that shirt in your relationship. Because if you don't have conversations in your relationship and your normal everyday life or family relationship, if you don't have conversation, everybody assumes something. And then when you assume something, it's not the truth a lot of times. And so you're living by that non-truth. And it's really a place of ignorance, and it prevails because that's what you keep doing.
Right.
So anyway.
All right. Let's see. What else did I have as far as questions? Well, so again, in the book that I was listening to this morning, she talked about the steering, which still happens, right? It was actually codified within NAR rules in the early 1900s. Then we made it illegal, right? Fair Housing said no more steering, and yet it is still fairly common practice in a lot, probably all areas. It's just, it's subtle now. Maybe that's the best word.
Yeah, it's sometimes you just don't say it; they just do it.
Give me an example.
People only show people houses in certain areas. They don't tell you I'm only showing you houses here. They just only show you houses there. Or they don't say I have a better idea, I have a better neighborhood for you. They just take you to the neighborhood.
So one of our agents called me last week and he had a great question, and we talked about it. We talked it through. And yet I don't know if what I advised him was appropriate or not. So he got a lead. He called the lead. The lead happens to be Black and said, I really want a Black agent. And I want to live in an area that is safe for Black people. Now, this is the opposite of what we would normally call steering. But how would you address that?
Well, the conversation, part of the conversation is that I can't show you houses that are only in Black neighborhoods. However, if you give me a list of neighborhoods that you like to live in, I can pull those neighborhoods.
We'll role play it. I'm not from San Diego. I don't know what those neighborhoods are. Can't you tell me?
I can't tell you a neighborhood based on racial makeup. However, if you go to the San Diego Almanac or whatever or you can go to the census, San Diego census, and you can see where those predominant areas are. But I can't tell you about a Black neighborhood. Or we can just take a tour through neighborhoods and you can see the makeup of the neighborhood and determine if that's a neighborhood you want to be in. Okay. I can't tell you what's a neighborhood. I can't tell you what's a Black neighborhood. Because if you and then you can soften it up and say, because if you actually buy in that neighborhood and then you move there and that's not the makeup of that neighborhood, now I become liable because I misled you.
Right. we get it a lot of times in the gay community, right? So right. First thing I told him was, of course, you connect the lead with an African-American agent. That's first, honor that request.
Right.
And then similar, let's have, and I committed to him that we'll put a list of resources together that we can say, we really can't talk about that. We're prohibited from it. Plus, I don't want to mislead you. So why don't you go do your research with these resources?
Right. So let me ask you a question then. And I know somebody's thinking this. They just haven't said it. It didn't pop up in the chat. So what if somebody said, I only want to work with a white agent? What would you say?
That's a great question, Emerick, and it actually just emotionally triggered me. I don't know.
What if somebody says, I only want to work with a gay agent? What would you say?
That happens all the time. Oh, it does, because
I know it does, because it happens with the Black agent conversation all the time.
So to me, it's the same conversation, but the impact is different. And I think it is right now, and I'm processing on the fly, when you belong to a minority group that has been persecuted in some way and is not accepted by the vast majority of the population, it makes sense that you want to be represented by somebody in that fraternity.
You want to be safe.
Safer. Yes.
You want to be safe. You want to be safe.
But when you ask that about a white person, I'm literally the hamster's going on in my head going, well, that could be, I can't imagine, and I'm sure it has happened, but I can't imagine somebody actually saying that. Again, I think it goes to subtlety, because some of the other people I've had on the call, including our agents, have said they know the second they showed up, and they were assumed to be white, they showed up, they were Black, the relationship just ended.
Exactly. So don't just say that people don't say that, because they do say it.
Oh, I'm sure they do. And again, this is my little bubble. I have a hard time thinking anybody would say that to me, because they would probably know they were going to get a reaction that wasn't pleasant.
Right. And so, and therein lies a challenge in this whole conversation, because like we look at people one way. If they say, I only want to work with a white agent, we look at them one way. And then I'm taking the other.
Wait, did you not pay the power bill? What's up?
That little timer, my screen blocks the timer so they can't see me. The motion sensor. So, and that becomes sensitive for other people, right? When they say, well, why is it that they can ask for a black agent or a gay agent, but I can't ask for a white agent? And that becomes the argument.
I'm teeth grinding right now. Oh,
I mean, but it's real. But let me give you, but however, let me give you the flip side of that. And then this is one thing I've always said, right? As being a white person, the general populace will deal with you however. So, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. As being a white person, you can deal with anybody in the population, and there is no judgment there, right?
I would say
Or
for the most part, that's right.
minimal judgment.
Yeah.
As being a black man, I can't work with the entire population, typically.
Right.
There is a judgment somewhere about who I am or who I might be, and that uncomfortability is released a lot of times when I begin to speak, and at least I'm speaking properly. So that diffuses,
Articulately.
that diffuses part of the situation, right? There's still other things that they're just waiting for the shoe to drop on, right?
Yeah.
Even you, let's just say you as a gay woman, right? You as a gay woman can work with all kinds of people.
Yep.
A gay man can't work with all kinds of people.
Yep.
Because there
Well,
is
and then there's
the
the levels of how apparent is it, right? I
exactly.
assume that everybody just looks at me and realizes I'm a lesbian, and at 45 there are still situations I have to come out, and I'm like, are you freaking blind?
Well, I mean, you just may just be a neutral dresser. But you get so, and so that question about, when that question comes up, what about if someone says I only want to work with a white male? I mean, I only want to work with a white real estate agent.
Yeah.
There's always that question. There's that question on that end of why should I be ashamed to ask for that person? Me personally, I if that's what you want, then that's what you get.
Yeah.
And that's your desire. I believe that people should want to, people can work with who
Well,
they want.
so two thoughts on that. First of all, yes, if the customer comes first, that's what they want. Great. Second, if somebody said that to me, I wouldn't want to work with them.
Right.
So that, I mean, why force them to work with anybody who's not white? Because it's gonna be pretty miserable for both.
Right. So do you feel that same way if somebody comes in and says, I only want to work with a black person?
No, because to me that then is a comfort and safety, and I can see. I mean, watch the news. I can see where if I'm spending that much time with somebody, having somebody represent me, I would want to have that commonality.
So is that a double standard? That's the double standard.
It is double standard. Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
I don't know if fair comes into it.
You want me to tell you what I say?
Yep.
This is one incidence where white privilege did not work for you.
One out of how many?
Exactly.
That's why I'm okay with the double standard.
Exactly. And I'm not saying it. I mean, and but however, for me, I just believe that people can work with whoever they want to work with. If you have racial biases and you say I don't want to work with a black person, then let me find you a white person. If you LGBTQ, then if that's what you want to work with, then okay, let me find you that person. In fact, I have actually said this to an agent before, and I'll tell you what I said to them. I said, listen, there is a niche market for you. That real estate is about niches. Work your niche. And I said, I'm not telling you to be exclusive. However, work your niche. And I said, this is a slogan, and you might can use it. You might have somebody use it in San Diego. I said, use the slogan. I sell the lifestyle. That could be that slogan. And guess what? If you're not LGBTQ, you will never understand what that means.
Oh, it can mean a lot of things. I thought, oh, that's actually brilliant because it can be interpreted by
All
different
kinds of ways.
Yep.
However, in that community, they know exactly what you're talking about. And you're in your community, they know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
I sell the lifestyle. It's code and it's neutral code.
Yeah. And there's so many of those, right? One that just popped into my head when you said that, when I see any business say we promote family values, I go, oh, well, they don't like us. And yet within the gay community, we go, hey, we're family.
Right.
Right. There's always some kind of code.
Yeah, right. So, it's just one of those things. What's your next question? Did you get all your questions?
I think that's a good one. I don't have any more specifics. Does anybody else? There's a couple in the chat. Let's see what they got going on here. Stephanie said, interesting perspective and discussion.
What's the perspective? Really what does that mean? I'm curious. When you say interesting perspective, what does that mean, Stephanie?
I thought it was interesting to say this is an instance when white privilege didn't work for you, because when the conversation first started, I was thinking, if someone came to me and said, I want to live, so I've had people come and say, I want to live in X neighborhood. And I'm like, well, gosh, that's interesting. I don't know where that neighborhood is. Why don't you tell me how we can go find it? Like, I don't even, like, I was thinking, if someone came to me today and said, I want to go into a Black neighborhood, I want to live in a Black neighborhood, I would say, okay, let me pull up San Diego County. There you go. Like, that's what my answer would be, because, but then is that my blinders? Am I not paying attention to recognize that? But if someone said to me, I want to live in a neighborhood where I can feel safe walking down the street as a gay person, I would say, I know areas where people would have a tendency to want to live there. So why is it that I'm aware of that neighborhood, but I'm not aware of another neighborhood? This is this new perspective of thinking, I try to be aware of this, but I just had it in my face. No, you have some more blind spots you need to work on. Okay. So I find that's really interesting.
So let me tell you about an issue that we have in the Black community. An issue that we have in the Black community is that we're invisible to white people a lot of times.
Oh, I'm hearing you.
we're invisible. It's like we can be in a room, right? And as long as we are not in a threatening posture, we're not even seen. Or we can be in a classroom. This happens a lot in the classroom. And we will sink into obscurity in a classroom and just almost be invisible. And we can feel invisible sometimes.
So we had a conversation as part of this panel last week. Do you think it's prevalent, and this has just come to my awareness in observing a lot of friends who are Black, who are really standoffish and tend to be wallflowers. And I wonder if that's related. In other words, they kind of fade if they're in a group of people in a mastermind or a class or whatever, they fade into the background. They don't want to stand out. And my first inclination was because there is sometimes a perception of white people that if you speak up as a Black person, you're just angry. You're angry and threatening. So do you think that a lot of people just soften that so that they're fighting against that, angry Black woman or angry Black man?
Well, one of the things that happens sometimes, and again, this is the world according to Emerick, it's not many times I feel that way where I have to slip into obscurity into the back of the room.
Well, it's really hard for you too anyway.
Yeah, a little difficult. So, but a lot of times it's that way because you don't feel comfortable in that space. you may not feel like you're going to be valid, like you're going to be valued in that space. You don't want to upset the apple cart. You just want to be in the room and observe, because anything that you say may expose a vulnerability that you have, and you never want to be in that space where you're vulnerable, or you may get asked a dumb question, or what you believe to be a dumb question, and you might respond in a way where you might be condemned, or you might be perceived as that angry black or white person. I mean, a black or woman or man.
It's interesting. I'll say from my perspective too, World According to Ashley, for the same reason with a sexual orientation difference, often that's the case. I don't want to be called on or put to be a center of attention, because I don't want to be in a position to offend the sensibilities of everybody else.
Right.
It's an interesting thing as a leader, right?
Right. Or sometimes you don't want to feel like you're the center of attention. But I'm going to tell you what I do in spaces like that. I actually, and I've done this multiple times, I actually make sure I participate in the conversation. And the reason why I make sure that I participate in the conversation, because I want you to know, number one, that yes, I am here. Number two, yes, we do have an intelligent perspective or point of view. And this is going to sound kind of crazy. I know that if I'm in that type of environment, I represent all Black people. And I want you to know that whatever you thought about us that may not have been as positive as it could have been, I'm going to shed a positive light about Black people on somebody in this room.
It's so interesting because, again, in the gay community, I feel that same level of responsibility. But I don't think if I was heterosexual and white, that would ever cross my mind that I am representing the entire white population of the world.
Because you're not.
Right.
Because
well,
you're in that space.
I wouldn't feel a responsibility to do that.
Okay.
Right.
Can I, so that's a funny thing. And I'm sorry for butting in on this.
No, you good.
No,
please. Tell some of your friends to speak up, because they're thinking the same thing that you're thinking. They just won't say anything.
So I came from corporate America, and I felt as a woman, 5'2" in corporate America, I was up against all the men, and I had to be a short, petite woman representing women, could be executives. And I felt that I was under so much more scrutiny.
Oh, you were. Guaranteed.
So I what you're saying resonates so true to me. And I think, gosh, how did I not even, and I just thought, oh, it's just all women. And I never looked at it from a sexual orientation or a color orientation or a, where your country of origin was. I never looked at it that way. So I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, but I am a white woman who felt that way, who felt that there was something, but it was a different bias and it was different prejudice. And it was so much easier for me. And I thought it was so hard then. And so anyways, yeah.
And it's interesting. There's so many layers to this, right? I mean, white men, typically Christian, heterosexual, are still the power players. And anybody who isn't that same person does have some of the deck stacked against them. I went to the University of San Diego, and I was the only out student on campus for almost my entire time there. However, there was one Black woman lesbian on campus. And we would joke, she had the 3 strikes. I mean, there was just nothing going for her. And then she ended up dating a Jewish woman. I'm like, oh my goodness. Each one of those just set her up for more styles of discrimination or marginalization. I don't want to use the word marginalization.
Right.
So there was not a room she was welcome into or fit into.
Right. And so what I want to say is, and I'm not picking, but Stephanie, I want you to imagine what you went through in that corporate room, right? What if that was your entire life? What if that was your entire perspective of life?
100%. And that's what I'm saying. I thought I had it hard. And now I'm thinking, wow, was I selfish and self-centered or what? Holy cow. Right. I'm so appreciative of this conversation every single week. And yeah.
Not every single week. Not every single week. Not last week. And I apologize for last week. That was totally
Dude,
on
I
me.
was terrified. I'm like, what happened to him? Did he get pulled over? What's going on?
So I do apologize. So, and so, you know, when we were in this conversation, I embrace conversations like this, Ashley. And the reason why I embrace the conversation, because, you know, with Stephanie and probably somebody else, the light bulb went off. And the light bulb goes off and said, wow. And so it's kind of sort of like the guy that was walking on the beach with the starfish. You remember that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's for those of you who don't know, there's a guy walking on the beach. It's all kinds of versions. But he's walking on the beach, and there's thousands of starfish that washed up on the shore, and he just started picking them up and throwing them back in the water. And somebody said something and said, "Why are you throwing those starfish back in the water? Because there's thousands of them out here, and you throwing those 10 or 20, that really doesn't matter." And so he picks up another starfish and say, "It does matter. It matters to that one." And so, you know, the question is, you know, who are we helping? And it's just one at a time. Now, let me make this clear. I am in therapy too, right? I'm in therapy too. And then the reason why I'm in therapy, because these conversations actually help me better understand how to deal with other people and my biases likewise. Because the more we talk about things, again, in the absence of a conversation, ignorance prevails. And so in these conversations, it opens my eyes. It gives me some things to think about a little bit differently. And maybe there could be some places where I have biases that I probably should not have, or maybe I say something that may be insensitive to somebody else. So
we all do it. And it's why I'm so grateful, because I feel safe with you. If I step on it, and by the way, one of our people called me on it last week, and I'm so grateful. If I step in it, especially as a leader, somebody's got to bring it to my attention. Right?
You want to share it? Would you share it?
I don't mind sharing. I don't want the other person to be outed with the conversation, though. After the panel that we did for the office meeting, I didn't give a plan of action, and I left the energy low. It was intense for a lot of us. Salam, who's on here, described the conversation that she has to have with her kids, and that's heavy when you really, really, really care about somebody, which we do.
Right.
And to know, you know, you had to sit down with your little boys and go through that. And I, as a leader, didn't bring the conversation back up and say, well, here's how we can help. I didn't give a plan of action. I just kind of let everybody sit in the muck and close the meeting.
Okay.
And the expectation is that I will, and it should be that, okay, everybody's sharing their stories and it's so valuable. And now what can we do? So, that was 5 days after the meeting, I got that call and I thought, oh, thank you. Now I will make sure I'm better prepared to end on a good point, so that people just aren't left, you know. And part of that is I was left there.
Right. And that's where the difficult part comes in sometime in these types of these conversations, is because the moderator or the facilitator of the conversation, they have to process their place of where they are, just like everybody else. And so unless it wasn't an impactful conversation for you, and which it typically is. And so you like that, and that's why I use the term a lot. I'm in therapy like everybody else. So if I make a mistake, you know, please don't judge me, because we're all growing. We're all growing.
And again, that's why I asked you, because I know if I make a mistake, you're going to gently correct me. You're not going to come after me.
No,
right?
Not. Even, you know what? Even, and I'm not saying this, even if it wasn't you, if it was somebody that made a mistake, unless they were like intentional in their error, I don't know if you can be intentional in your error, but unless you were like grossly intentional, I would still gently correct you, because at the end of the day, it's about making a difference, not making a statement,
not making a point. Yeah.
Yeah.
On Monday, I had a friend of mine on our Zoom, who's an artist, singer, and the name of her band is Disappear Fear. And my spiritual belief is that there's really only two motivations and two emotions. They're all related to either love or fear.
Right.
And so if somebody's coming out of intention and really nastiness, to me, that always indicates they're terrified of something.
Right.
And I attempt to get really curious about what that fear is so that I can help them move towards love and release that fear. And if we make people wrong or we need to make a point, we lose the ability to have that impact.
Absolutely. Because everybody wants to do what? Two things?
Look good, be right.
Be right.
Thank you, Diana Kokoska.
And so, yeah. And with it, you know, and in this conversation, I believe that we have to come with an empty cup. We have to come with an empty, it is kind of bizarre, but an empty half full cup. An empty cup because there's so many things that you don't know that you probably should know and you probably have to know. And so your cup is empty from that place. But then your cup is half full of perspective of what you feel about that topic. And you can't let the half full overshadow the emptiness.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, you can't let the half full overshadow the emptiness, because the emptiness is where all the opportunity is. Because it is, you are coming empty in that space.
Well, and that's why most of the time, you know, there's been plenty of darkness this year, right? Dark events that are happening, and they're still happening. And yet I'm giddy most of the time, which is an interesting place to be, because I have not had a period of learning and growing like this ever. And I made the intentional choice a couple weeks ago. This is my best year ever. This is my best growth year ever. And it's because of events that have unfolded, that have provided the opportunity to learn everything about my world and my life and my company all over again.
Right. And that's because you're a learning-based person. And you seek the truth. When you don't seek the truth, it's really, when you don't seek the real truth, it's actually really, you can't really learn much, because again, it comes back to your cup being half full or empty. The half full, which is half full of perspective, overshadows the emptiness, and you really don't allow it to.
Well, you can't have that awareness.
Right.
You know, I don't think most of us are walking around thinking, well, half of the stuff that I've been programmed with isn't true.
But exactly. In the absence of a conversation,
ignorance prevails.
Yeah, and that's it, because people make all kinds of statements. This is the statement that like drives me up the wall from that perspective. Well, slavery ended in 1865. You know, well, why are we still having this conversation? You guys, everything is equal. Everybody's been free for, 260 years, 160 years. Everything is even.
We're not responsible for what happened back then. Why are you making me?
I wasn't alive back then. I don't have anything to do with that. And I get it. Technically, you don't. But the question is, if you don't have the awareness to understand that you've been a major benefactor of that, that's where the issue came. That's where the real challenge comes in.
Well, and then I know several years ago, I fell into the mindset of, yeah, but I still had to struggle. You know, everybody has equal access now. I had to struggle. So what's the difference? And I had to learn. There's a massive difference.
And that's what it, in fact, I made a post. I made a comment. Edmund wrote an article today on, it's a great article. It's on the history of race and home ownership. And I was kind of shocked that they had the guts to print the article, to be honest with you. Because it could create some other conversations for a lot of people. And so I'm going to read you what I wrote on there.
And I would encourage us, especially in this time, anybody who's listening, if you haven't read or listened to Becoming, Michelle Obama's book, it's the longest Audible I've ever bought. It's 19 hours. So to keep me busy on my walks for this month. But she actually touches on that, where her dad and her mom were not willing to buy real estate. And part of that was because of the steering that was going on, and they just didn't want to be tied down to a property. I didn't realize that part of the Black perspective on real estate back in the 50s and 60s.
And so if you get a chance to read the Inman article, it's really interesting article on housing. And so I made a comment, and I just said, thank you, Inman, for bringing light to a part of unjust history that is not written in the history books. So people just don't really know it. I said, the sad part, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other areas in life that are equally or worse in their vicious attack against humanity, parentheses, Black people. Slavery ended in 1865. However, the effects of Jim Crow created legal, mental, social, economic, and basic dignity slavery that is not ended even up until today. We are far cry better. However, reversing 400 years of economic, social, and governmental oppression will take much longer. I remain optimistic of the possibilities. I clearly understand I'm a beacon of hope for my community. Much respect for having the courage to print this article.
Yeah.
And that's what I sent back to them. Because in having that conversation about everything that goes on in their slavery ended in 1865, you clearly don't, when you tell me that, you clearly have no understanding of what Jim Crow was.
Well, I actually, in preparing for this conversation I'm having later today, I realized again, in all my schooling, I'd heard about Jim Crow, but it was so glossed over. Even, I mean, I was born in 1975. So even studying the civil rights movement, it was so glossed over. The depth of the stories and what really happened was never exposed to me till at 45 years old. And when I choose to believe any person who really starts to wrap their head around what Jim Crow was, and the impacts of that, they can't say any longer, well, it was 100, over in 1865.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so, and then sometimes you even find a place.
Oh, and by the way, even understanding that, then I would go back to, let's full circle back. So if somebody said as a Black person they want a Black agent, I'd go, I totally get it, because we're not that far removed from that.
And so, and even in that space where you have that conversation of Jim Crow, I've seen people, I've heard of situations where people just say, "Oh, that was a minstrel show. That was okay." It wasn't just a minstrel show. It wasn't just that whole blackface. It was they only understand it as minstrel show and blackface, but it was so much more than that.
Well, and it's a hard thing. I think I'll speak for myself. I have said in the last month, I miss my years of naivety. There are times when I wish I could go back and not know what I now know. And it's hard. It's an act. And I'm saying for anybody who is starting to study what has really happened, it's hard. I don't want to read some of the stuff I'm reading.
Being woke is a difficult thing.
Yeah.
Because now you have to untie all of the false truths that you've known for most of your life.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to go back and untie all of the untruth knots for their entire life, because it absolutely has to make you question sometimes who you are as a person.
Oh, for sure it does. For sure it does.
So it is.
Well, I'm excited. So on Friday, Regina Polk's going to be my guest.
Okay.
You know, I love the perspective you bring to us. And as a Black woman leader coach, she's got a whole different perspective. So
right, she does. But you know, and I appreciate, you know, just having, as I said to you before, I appreciate just having a conversation. And sometimes, unfortunately, some people can't handle this conversation with me because I'm unplugged. I mean, I'm not gonna I'm not all fully unplugged. Let me tell you, because
oh, you've had your moments, sir.
I'm not fully unplugged because again, I always say it. It's like a few good men.
You can't handle the truth.
Can't handle the truth. But we just have to we have to do what we do, and the main objective is to help people to grow and to help people get to a better place as I get to a better place. And however I can help to do my part, you know, I'm open. I'm open.
Well, and it just becomes clearer and clearer and clearer to me that we all need each other so much to help each other grow through this and get better.
And the truth is, you know, society as a whole, if you want to be real honest about it, society as a whole just becomes a better place when we do that.
Yeah.
Because I want to just wrap your brain around this, you know. And this is probably just I'm not sure there's a right way to put this, but I'm just going to say it.
Just say it.
What if we lived in something close to a semblance of a true equal society, right? With equal access throughout, across, up and down, right? Really, how great would America be?
Oh my gosh, the possibility is crazy.
How great would America be?
As great as we say we are now. Or claim to be now.
Or will we just be making America great again?
All right, I'm glad it's almost 9.
Woo. Okay. So no, I'm glad we had it. I'm glad we had this great conversation as usual. As usual, as usual, as usual.
Love you, man.
Love you too, dear. It's great to have this conversation, and I'm just waiting until we can like actually get out and not be stuck.
Oh man, we just got shut down again.
Yeah, that's because y'all didn't listen in the first place.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation we can get into. Yeah. I'll tell you, this struck me the other morning. I go out and walk really early, primarily because my day starts early. And I often don't see another human being because it's 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And I've been walking in the afternoon a little bit more just to get some sun. And I don't know if it's just because my awareness is peaked. It's not really intentional, but whether I've passed somebody on the street or in a store, I'm gravitating to interact with the Black employee or the Black walker. And that is I really think it's just because now it's so forefront in my mind that we're having these conversations. And I've seen body language change in really positive ways, right? It's been really cool. I went to Home Depot last weekend and there was like 7 Home Depot employees, and I walked up right to a young Black woman and asked her to help me. And all the white people were like, what? And it was just natural. It wasn't intentional, but as soon as I smiled and she smiled, oh my gosh, the energy shifted from shock to.
A mind expanded will never contract back to the same size. Who said that? One of your bowl folks. I mean, I learned it in a bowl room somewhere.
Yeah, Diana wrote that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she read it somewhere.
Right. and so it's just that awareness. And it feels, and it actually feels good to have a genuine smile with somebody and they smile back. But Celine, she wrote something. She said, is there a right time to have these discussions with children? Do we wait until they ask? I believe that this is my opinion, my kids aren't that small. You have the conversation when you believe they can understand the conversation. Because if they are aware, then it just makes them more enlightened to the things around them. And you want to protect their innocence as much as possible, but there's nothing you can do. The shock or the trauma of you not having that conversation and them being called something or treated a certain way, and they not expect it, or they not even have a knowledge of that could happen, you can't measure that trauma. So for me, it's just a, I believe it's just a conversation, and it's not a deep conversation. It's just a conversation of awareness, because
maybe we can go there next Wednesday, because Salam shared, she's not originally from the U.S. and when did you move here, Salam? How old were you?
I was 9.
Okay, but when you shared this on the panel, I was really kind of surprised, only because I've been having the conversations with Emerick and other Black friends who say, oh yeah, we have the talk. And that didn't come into your awareness until like now.
Yeah, I didn't even know about the talk for the police, like for your boys. I had no clue until now.
Yeah. So maybe we can revisit that next week, Emerick, and Salam, come back, please. And, you got a Black father here who can give you some good guidance.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's about sharing for all of us, and we just can't overlook it. We can't ignore it. It's real. Yeah. It's real. And kids, sometimes we don't think kids know things. Kids are more sensitive to things than we really know and understand, particularly in today's society, because the exposure is so great. They suffer. I honestly believe that they suffer from, no, they don't suffer from it. Sometimes they get into sensory overload because what we tell them at home and what they get in the world are just two totally different places.
Yeah.
And there's probably a certain amount of confusion of what's real and what's not real.
Well, not just for kids. That's me right now.
Right.
All right. Love you, man.
Yes.
So at the end of every Zoom I'm going to give action steps. Smile, legitimately smile at more people, and do something this week that will increase your understanding. Go learn something, read, listen to a podcast, ask questions. Just come from curiosity and realize we don't know it all.
Just so you really quick, Ashley, before you go, there is a universal language in Black world. You want me to tell you what the universal language is?
Food?
Nope. No matter where we are. Let me show you what it is. Look, Salam laughing. Look, that it doesn't matter where we are, right? We smile and say,
yes, absolutely.
If you don't know the person, so if you do that, you smile and do like this, watch what happens. Just smile and do like this.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to
test the code. That's the code. That's the code. So if you're there, just smile and say.
Awesome.
All right, dear.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
All right, everybody. See y'all later.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.